Hello, this is the Surviving Healthcare Podcast, and I have my great friend and colleague, Margaret Aranda, to tell us about her adventures in California healthcare and her career and so on. And so it's quite a story, and I'll let her have at it. Tell us first about your professional background, Margaret. It's quite impressive. It eclipses mine by a great deal.
Thank you. Well, I was never the smartest one in the class, but I grew up as a little mom to 6 siblings. So I cooked and cleaned and did everything by the time I was 13. I made my first Thanksgiving dinner. So I grew up with a lot of common sense and a very strong work ethic. So I think that helped me a lot to excel in my clinicals, and the academic was I had to study hard. I didn't have a photographic memory like so many doctors in our medical school classes, right? But I got accepted to Oral Roberts University Medical School. And then when it closed down, I transferred to USC. So I graduated USC Medical School and then did internship there, including 2 rotations in the jail ward. And then I did anesthesia my first couple of years, transferred out, completed anesthesia residency at Stanford, and then they liked me, so I stayed, and I liked them, so I stayed on for a critical care fellowship as one of 3 in the country who competed for the positions. Then my first job was as attending assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania. I ended up being in 3 departments. I wrote $3 million in NIH grants and worked on collaborative research with Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz, Germany. And then I was chief of the Department of Anesthesiology at the Philadelphia VA during 9/11.
Wow.
After that, my dad got Alzheimer's, so I came back to California as UCLA faculty and director of the Surgical Intensive Care Unit as a staff anesthesiologist at the West Los Angeles VA. Then, as you know, my daughter and I were in a tragic car accident. I spent 12 years bedridden with a traumatic brain injury, unable to walk or talk. I had dysautonomia very severely. I could not stand up without fainting. Nobody knew what it was, so the doctors thought I was pretending. I had a near-death experience, and God let me come back, even though He gave me permission to go into that cloud in the sky to heaven. So then I came back to inherit a pain clinic. I assumed an existing pain clinic with patients already on a lot of different high-dose medications. I tapered everybody down over 3 to 4 years, and also during the last 3 years was extremely grateful that I learned how to use ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and polypharmacy to save with 0 deaths over 2,500 patients. And then I got, in my opinion, I got targeted by the Medical Board of California.
Of course. So were you actually unconscious for all those years? How do you have memories of the whole thing, or how did it work?
I was never unconscious. I never hit my head. So the doctors were reluctant to give me a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury, which is why I wrote the Rebel Patient book that goes over how to fight for your diagnosis and get the proper treatment, and how to use the medical system to get what you know you deserve, which is a chance to save your own life if that's what it takes. So I was basically bedridden at my worst. I was unable to even say the word "the," and I could not stand up. I went to brain rehab for a month at Northridge Hospital brain rehab, and it was so they literally had to teach me how to brush my teeth, and I went through 6 courses of speech therapy before I could say the word "the." And I remember looking at her mouth and her lips and like, where do you put everything? How do you breathe? So God really blessed me. I ended up remembering everything I ever learned in medical school. And God blessed me with the ability to inherit this big population of pain patients who were on a lot of medications. Some of them I had never heard of, like acetazolamide, et cetera. They were not anesthesia drugs we use in the operating room. So it was a a prelude to what we all as physicians had to learn when COVID came around, because we had to start using a lot of drugs that none of us had ever used, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. But as an anesthesiologist, I was a great shoe-in for that, because that was my job, to give drugs I had never used before, watch what happened, become comfortable with it, and then become extremely proficient at it.
What woke you up to the COVID frauds?
The first thing that woke me up was that, honestly, the vaccines came out too fast, but when they did come out, they selected the first population to be the doctors and nurses on the front lines in the hospital. I'm like, why would you want to test? Basically, that's what you're doing with something experimental. A brand new vaccine on the very workforce that is slated to help the entire population.
Yeah, I had the similar experience. I'd been researching Butchered by Healthcare, which is my medical corruption book, and I understood that the anything that was developed that rapidly was fraudulent. And so my wife and I we were stuck in a foreign country, but we immediately said we were never going to get vaccinated for this thing. And my wife has not taken any vaccines in her adult life because she hasn't even taken a flu vaccine, which I regarded as harmless, but lately discovered that it wasn't. And especially with the new mRNA technology they're putting in flu vaccines, it's anything but harmless. So so that's our story about the beginning of my waking up. So how did your daughter have a injury in the accident, or she did pretty well?
Thank you. She was 2 years old. She was sitting in the back seat with the puppy in a crate. I had tightened her belt really tight, just serendipitously, or the voice of the Holy Spirit, before I left that day to go drive in the car. We were visiting my dad, who had Alzheimer's, at a facility. We were driving down Malibu Canyon towards Pacific Coast Highway. So it happened actually right in front of Pepperdine University. A lady just T-boned us. She leaned over to get something off the ground and then lost control of her car. She pressed the gas, never pressed her brakes at all. She hit us about 90 miles an hour into a Suburban. She had a little two-seater MG convertible. So she spun us around in a complete circle and jumped us over to face oncoming traffic. That's how hard she hit us. And she totaled a truck behind us and totaled
Wow.
her car, of course. So my daughter was perfectly fine. She had been looking down at a little leap pad that she had. She was only 2, but she was all into all that stuff. So somehow God made it so that her brain and her spinal cord were protected. And the only thing she really suffered was the loss of her mom, the way she knew her. And she's a nurse now. She's 21. She turns 21 in August. So she's seen
Yeah.
a lot.
Now you had some sort of financial support during your time, I recall, your period where you were incapacitated.
I had long-term care insurance. So that paid for a full-time caregiver 24/7. We bought one of the best policies that was available at the time, around 2000 or so, 2001. And because my dad had Alzheimer's, my ex-husband at the time and I were concerned that I would get it too. So we bought you can't even buy that policy anymore. But yeah, they paid for a full-time, had it not been for a full-time caregiver, even though there were a lot of caveats with that situation, they stole from me. And, it was a horrifying experience to depend on another human being for everything. But they did pay them for those 12 years that I was fully disabled. And I'm grateful for that.
So you just had one person, or you turned over these people?
Well, I had one person helping me all the time,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they were rotating. Sometimes I had 2, but fortunately, at least one of them could stay with me 24/7 for maybe 2 or 3 days at a time.
And you had to do this by yourself. You didn't have anybody who was an advocate.
No, I didn't have an advocate. It was actually my idea to call the insurance company and ask them if my disability was covered. They were kind of funny in the beginning. They didn't want to pay because I would say, well, I can't do anything. I can't even take a shower. I can't even stand up in the shower. I'll faint. They're like, well, have you tried? I'm like, yes. And then I turn gray. Do you want me to hit my head and have another head injury on top of this? Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, go back and bump it up to a supervisor. So yeah, I even had to advocate for myself that way. And my ex-husband at the time was, I would say, he was extremely supportive for the first 6 months, maybe. And then after that, wasn't.
Wow. Um, so your verbal abilities were intact. You just couldn't get up.
I had a severe expressive aphasia. So I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't make the words come out. I would know what it would start with, what letter it started with, or how many syllables it had, but I couldn't get it out of my brain. From my brain to my mouth, it was impossible. And then over the years, it gradually got better, especially with the speech therapy. But even at that, in the beginning, when I was learning how to speak, my brain was running faster than my mouth. And I would stumble over my words if I said them too fast, or if I had like a stream that was too fast. So I had to learn to slow down my brain and have it keep pace with my mouth. And then obviously now you can't shut me up. So it got better.
So you were able to eventually write a couple of books during your period of disability. Is that correct?
I wrote 6 books while I was sick in bed. The first book is my No More Tears book that discusses my near-death experience and what it felt like to be a doctor who was mistreated by the medical profession and severely disabled without having any validation until I saw one cardiologist who was able to diagnose me with the dysautonomia. But even, the traumatic brain injury, they didn't want to give me that diagnosis for a long time. It was a very haphazardly written book. I was sick and tired of it by the time I was done. I never wanted to see it again. It had really long paragraphs and some stream of thought. I had, get this, I had polyuria and polydipsia. So everything I drank, I peed. If I drank more, I peed more. If I drank more, I drank all the time, and ate salt on my bananas, salt on my yogurt, salt everywhere. So I would retain it. I would still pee more. It was impossible. So what they did is they gave me a PICC line. And so it's a peripherally inserted central catheter. It's an IV that goes in your arm, in front of the elbow, and weeds all the way up into the right upper chamber of your heart to drip fluid in there. And in my first book, I made people listen to that humdrum and drip drop and go through all the battery changes. How much fluid do I have in there before I go to sleep? Because otherwise I'll wake up and the line will be clotted. Then it was horrendous. The weekends were the worst to get a clotted or an infected line. And as an anesthesiologist, you can imagine how eerie it was to watch the drops go into myself when I should be watching them going into my operating room patients or my ICU patients. And then I wrote The Rebel Patient. I wrote 2 books, children's books, a book on a woman, a girl growing to a woman, because I thought I would die and I wanted to leave that behind for my daughter. And then I wrote a guidebook to low back pain after I assumed the medical clinic.
Who took care of your daughter during this period?
She had a nanny, or sometimes if my caregiver consented to it, then my caregiver would also be a nanny. And I learned much later that, for example, when I was in the hospital for a weekend, one particular nanny, who I'm very grateful for, took her home for the weekend.
You must be very close to your daughter after this experience.
We've been through a lot together, and I do everything I can for her. And we have a really good relationship.
So you didn't even have any swelling visible on your brain scans?
No, the brain scans all came out negative. I had to go to Colorado for a very special brain scan that finally showed something. But I will say that I went to the ER, particular ER, repetitively because nobody knew what the dysautonomia was. And at one point I felt like I was going to die. one of the ER docs at that time somehow thought of doing a spiral CT. So it looked at the arterial system and the venous system in my brain. And that's when they found that I also had a vertebral artery dissection. So there was a rip in the artery on my left side that had formed a cut in the artery, and it had, my blood pressure had been high enough and my heart rate had been high enough that eventually ballooned out into an aneurysm. So that left me with something called mal de débarquement syndrome, named after French sailors who got off of a ship and couldn't walk in a straight line. They walked like they were drunk. So it's like debarking off of a ship. So I basically could not walk across a room unless I went around the periphery or held on to furniture like a blind person. And if I stood up and closed my eyes, I felt like I was suspended in outer space. I had no grounding whatsoever. I didn't know where planet Earth was. I didn't have any orientation, no proprioception, nothing going from my feet up my spinal cord to my brain or my silhouette of my body to tell me where I was in space. And that caused me to have extremely severe migraines. I usually woke up and threw up. I threw up all day long, and I was bouncing in and out of the ERs for migraines, vomiting the whole time as well.
Well, just for the listeners, there are four arteries that supply the brain. The two in the back are the vertebral arteries. They go through the spine in places, and then the two in front of the carotids, which everyone's heard of. And she found that she had a concealed problem with the vertebral artery, and this created this imbalance that made it so you could hardly walk. I assume you just gradually improved, or was there a watershed moment at a year before your complete recovery that you just got better?
That's a great question. You know, at that time, there wasn't that much even literature on this subject. So sometimes they would go in and try to repair it. Other times medically manage it with a blood thinner, similar to atrial fibrillation or some other clotting issue, because the blood could go into that balloon area and start to clot because the flow would be too low. So I was on blood thinners for probably 3 or 4 years. And then actually I started getting better and better and better. I got so much better, actually, that Stanford accepted me to do a 1-year buffer, you know, like a clinical fellowship that would re-expose me to my profession so that I could get my skills back. I woke up one morning and I couldn't walk in a straight line, which was scary for the vertebral artery part of it. So I went to the ER, got admitted, and the worst thing happened. This is why I wrote the Rebel Patient book. The neurologist came in to examine me because I looked so young compared to everybody else in the cardiology ward with dysautonomia. I'm 62 right now, and people usually think I'm much younger, and they underestimate me because of that, or they think I'm lying. I guess I don't know why the doctors always thought I was lying. So this particular neurologist came in, and he was examining me, and he asked me during his exam to have me stand up and close my eyes so that I could like touch my nose and, you know, do different things. And I said, if I do that, I'm going to fall. Like, you need to know that I'm going to fall. And he looked at me all brassy, like, don't worry, I'll just catch you if you fall. Well, I closed my eyes, and the next thing I knew, I was looking at his shoes. And his feet were in the same exact spot that they
He
were.
didn't catch you.
Didn't catch me. So I sustained a second traumatic brain injury, and that polyuria and polydipsia, where I was thirsty, peeing. I ended up with diabetes insipidus twice. The second time was his fault.
Oh my God.
Maybe my fault too for trusting him, but I trusted him. And I put that in the Rebel Patient book too. And I put a picture of how he was looking up, like with his hand on his shoulder, like he even thought I was faking that. And I ended up going on vasopressin, or ADH, antidiuretic hormone, because that knocked out my posterior pituitary gland in the brain. It like hangs like an apple. It knocked out my ability to hold on to water. that is incompatible with life. And it got so bad. And that's why I was on the PICC line for 3 years. It went undiagnosed. They knew I needed water and I couldn't drink enough, but I didn't know why. So here I finally told them to test me for it, and they did, and I had it. But I'll tell you, being on an injectable vasopressin drug to tell your body to absorb water, when I was in the hospital during that admission, oh, actually, not that one, but further down the line, the nurse accidentally, it's like insulin, like the littlest, tiniest amount could be an overdose or an underdose, including the amount that's in the head of that needle. And the nurse gave me an overdose. Imagine getting waterlogged in 5 minutes. My eyes were bulging, my head was bulging, everything was, I had the worst headache, and they didn't want to do a thing about it. They wouldn't give me diuretics, nothing. I had to suffer for like 3 days after that. So pitfalls of being a patient, the things that could go wrong, all those things are in my Rebel Patient book. The second revised edition is coming out probably this summer. The revised edition of the No More Tears book is coming out. It's much more, both of these are much more clear, concise. There's a lot of images, a lot of inspiration, a lot of empowerment for patients, and a lot of spirituality as well. Because had it not been for my relationship with God and my belief that He would heal me and that I was here for an ultimate purpose, I don't think that I would have been able to forge through as much as I did with as much perseverance as I had.
We're incredibly resilient, and this is what I pray about these COVID shots: is that my kids and all the other people who ended up taking them will have a chance to heal themselves. And so we don't know how bad it's going to be, and there are still people who are compromised who are dying of a shot they got a year ago. But I'm hoping that the young, healthy ones will do fine, and I'm hoping that there won't be another wave of supposed therapy like this that damages everyone worse. And your story is very heartening. It's a inspirational, and it's just amazing how long it can take to overcome this stuff physically. And how many years ago was it that you were at the end of this process and you were just coming out of the woods?
That occurred in the car accident was in 2005. The brain injury was completely resolved the second time in 2017, 2018. So I was able to have an active medical license in 2018. And so, that it's been a long, hard road. And the thing I would like to say to people that have a vaccine injury is that I know it can be extremely frustrating to get a basket diagnosis, especially like long COVID, but they don't really treat you for dysautonomia or anything specific. They just send you home, right? Like it was with COVID, like, yeah, just tell me if you get worse. So as far as the spirituality aspect of it, God, I held on to God and Christ on earth being able to heal a blind man, to make him see. If God can make a blind man see, that's neurologic tissue. We know that the optic nerve goes straight to the brain. It has an incredible function of vision. You don't need a diagnosis from a doctor to get healed. All you need is God's power to overcome everything. And that may take time. For me, even though I had that near-death experience and was promised that I could come back and watch my daughter grow up, I laid in bed, looking at the ceiling, fighting for my life every day for 12 years.
2018, that's pretty recent. I mean, you're doing so well. And I've had similar experiences with medical personnel, and I emphasize over and over that people need to take responsibility for themselves, and do their own research. And a lot of times they have to tell the doctors what to do, or correct the doctors, or change course, or better yet, sometimes get another doctor, because you can get a virtual consultation at the drop of a hat these days. It's been legal to operate virtually in the United States as physicians ever since Trump made a proclamation, or whatever they say, when he was president. So it's a wonderful story. And I guess I'm going to go to the what my listeners might be the most interested in, and that is your experience during the COVID for treating patients, your ideas about what the best post-vaccine injury treatment is, and of course, the vaccine injuries have been characterized as COVID injuries to scare people and to damage them even further psychologically, and that's all been a pack of lies. I mean, they're virtually all vaccine injuries. COVID, treated properly, is a nothing burger, as we say here in Pasadena. The home of In-N-Out Burger. We call it a nothing burger. So jump into that if you would be kind enough to do it,
Sure.
and I'll listen.
Sure. And I think you're absolutely right on the first part. You have to be a rebel. When you know that there's something wrong with you and the doctors aren't satisfying that instinct that God gave us, that there's still something wrong with you and there's something else that needs to be found, you need to take that to heart. You need to join groups of other people that have the same symptoms, read everything you can about it, be your own advocate, research it, and try to learn the language so that when you go to a doctor, you have specific things in mind. So one of the things, whether you're vaccine injured and they're giving you something or not, and we'll talk about all the alternative things that are out there that are helping many people. Number one, you need to know how a doctor thinks. Number two, before you go to an appointment, you need to know in your head what you want when you walk out. And it shouldn't just be a prescription. We're all locked into that, right? Thinking that if I go to the doctor, I should get a prescription and a magic pill is going to make something go away. That could definitely be the case. For me in dysautonomia, that was midodrine. It made my blood pressure go up. But for a lot of things, it may be a consultation to somebody else who knows more because this doctor doesn't know. And yes, in your head, and you have to be super careful too, during the appointment, you don't want to be a complicated patient. You don't want to exsanguinate the doctor's energy so that they really don't want to spend time talking to you the next time because I have 20 more patients to see after your 7 minutes are up. If the doctor asks you a yes or no question, say nothing but yes or no, because they're starting with an algorithm up here. Yes or no goes this way. And then they're going to ask you another question. Yes or no goes this way. And then they're going to ask you another question. Same thing to infinity until you get to your diagnosis. And if you're stuck up here telling stories about what happened and this and that and using your doctor as their psychologist, you're not going to ever get to the diagnosis. So in my Rebel Patient book, I go through that, what a SOAP note is, how a doctor thinks, when to fire your doctor in your head while you're talking to him or her, and 26 doctors, 24 to 26 before I got my diagnosis of dysautonomia. So on the post-vaccine injury, I'm writing another book. It's a guidebook to spike protein detox. It's going to list everything from A to Z that could possibly help. So there's probably not one magic formula for everybody is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is you're not everybody. You're you, and you have specific concerns, a specific history. And so what works for somebody may not work for you. There could be a magic bullet for you. That means you have to keep trying different things until you find either the combination or the one thing that works. So everything from ivermectin, which has helped neurologic injury and spasm and semi-paralysis, people unable to walk, just to cut down the viral load and excrete it, the spike protein out of your stool, to supplements. Of course, the vitamin Ds, the vitamin C, the quercetin, which acts like hydroxychloroquine. It's structurally similar. The zinc, because both of those are zinc ionophores and depend on zinc to go into a virus to stop it from multiplying. I'd like to talk about the two newest things that the doctor groups that I'm in are talking about, and they're both outside of the country very bigly. One is in 80 countries already that nobody's ever heard of. And the other one is brand new. Just within the last month or so, the Italians have come up with a concoction. So the first one is called Clean Slate. The vaccines and multiple vaccines over time can deposit heavy metals in your system, especially if you've had multiple MRIs with gadolinium or other contrast. That metal is going to stay in your body. So I highly recommend a detox for everybody, whether it's a potion-like thing with a shaker bottle and a diet change like Metagenics has, a liver detox formulation. It'll bring metals and molds and other leftover things all over your body and present them to the liver. Then stage 2, it allows the liver to chelate and metabolize them and ID them as toxic, ready for excretion. And then number 3, it assists your body in eliminating the toxins through your stool, your sweat, and your urine. So that's a diet is number 1 and detox is number 1. The particular product on Metagenics is Clear Change. There's a simpler formula that's in a bottle called Clean Slate. It is from the Root brands. That one is a zeolite solution made by lava hitting seawater. So it's got a honeycomb structure with a negative charge that attracts all the metals to go into that and bind it and then excrete it. So there's been a lot of really good other maladies like psoriatic arthritis, painful, extreme conditions that have also cleared up as a result of a zeolite solution. And then the second product that is brand spanking new out of Italy is an augmented NAC, or N-acetylcysteine as a supplement, right? The FDA tried to take it off Amazon, et cetera. That one, they used quantum methods to hyperactivate the NIC capsule. And it has been shown in their own studies to versus regular NAC, which can denature or crumble up a spike protein into parts, so it's inactivated, 12% with regular NAC. And then with the augmented NAC, they show data where it's 99% denatured. So seems like you can eliminate much of the spike protein in your body that way. So I highly recommend, if you're suffering from multiple chronic, vague, horrific symptoms that leave you unable to do the activities of daily life that everybody else around you is doing, to try a detox first, and then go along with trying a lot of different things like Clean Slate or the augmented NAC. And then my book is going to have is A to Z. It's going to have pine needle, the dandelion root, all kinds of native remedies, because now I don't have my medical license anymore. I've switched out to become a research physician and a certified tribal practitioner. So we know there are a lot of natural remedies out there that the Native American, Indigenous Indians, and other tribes and the Chinese have used for centuries. So we're bringing that more into the fore.
So the first thing you mentioned is almost like an oral chelator, right? Traditionally,
Yes.
chelation has been given intravenously, and it works quite well for heavy metals. It can you can get rid of mercury and zinc and a lot of other things using this, and it's accepted. And the second is more like explain a little bit about NAC, N-acetylcysteine. That's a harmless supplement that you can get anywhere. And this is a long-acting kind or something. What is it?
Yeah, it's they've used quantum methods to augment its ability to have better bioavailability in your body, so that its effects are multiplied with lower doses. So N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, is a glutathione donor. Glutathione is the most potent antioxidant known to man. So it's going to stop free radical formation, inflammation, a whole list of things that are caused by multiple chronic illnesses. And so and there are other people that are applying quantum frequencies to different things, right? There's Spooky 2 is like 63,000 people, scientists on Facebook. There's a machine you can buy. Like if you sing at a high voice, a woman soprano can break a glass. You can use the same frequency theories to kill a bacteria, say. So I'm not saying that they applied an actual frequency with the augmented NAC, but that's a way to think about it. This is quantum physics. It is a new method. And instead of taking 1,200 milligrams of over-the-counter NAC to 2,000 milligrams, you take 200, because you don't need as much, because they found a way to make it work better at a much lower dose.
So you take NAC yourself?
I have to order that one still. It's so brand new and it comes from Italy, but I'm in the doctor groups that have it. I have my website at arandaenterprises.com has a drop down for it, and I'm in the process of getting it shipped.
Let's
So I'm
we'll put.
healthy. I'm
No, you look
healthy.
great. You look
I,
great.
I don't really feel that I need to take a lot, but trust me when I say I have a lot of uh I have a supply of supplements around me 24/7 because anything could happen. Everybody's bracing for the next thing, and I don't want to be caught without.
I bought a 3 pound jar of vitamin C powdered, and the trouble is you take too much of that and you get diarrhea. And then I bought the
Right.
lipolyzed. Is that what it is? Lipolyzed vitamin C, which doesn't cause problems and is about 3 times as strong per gram. So we'll hopefully be able to supply links to all this stuff in the show notes. Um, you have so many things I want to talk about. I can't resist asking some other. But quickly first, did you get a publishers for your books, or how did you publish them on Amazon? Right?
Um, Yeah, I have my guidebook to low back pain was self-published without a publisher on Amazon. And then I have my two children's books, Little Missy Two Shoes Likes a Ladybug for a Ladybug Party for toddlers. And then Little Missy Two Shoes Likes to Go to School so that toddlers don't have tantrums when they go back to school. So those are both on Amazon. The two children's books were published in a sort of a model of self-publishing with Mainspring Books, where I did a lot of the work and then they fixed it up and did their magic wand on it to make it show up. So the rest of my books will be coming out with Mainspring Books, and they'll all be available on Amazon.
Good for you. I'm going to have to hook you up with the Amazon ads contractor I use. I don't know whether I've told you about him, but he keeps my books selling. Now I don't make any money on them. I pretty much give him all the money, but but it's a passion project, and of course I think it's important. So, we're trying to get the word out, and Amazon censored my fourth book, which is Cassandra's Memo. It was a description of everything that had happened in the last 24 months, and it's still available on Barnes and Noble though, because they're not organized enough to censor. They probably would if they could. So that in hardcover, and I offer them free for my listeners through the ebook free through a download site, and I put that on all my posts. So tell the story. Now we're getting into the the juicy stuff.
And
Tell
nitty
the
gritty.
nitty gritty. Tell the story of your experiences. Just a little, flesh out a little bit more your experiences treating COVID on that 2,400 patients or whatever it was. Did you do virtual consultations, and how did the medical board get onto you, and what were their claims, and what was the whole process like? We share this um,
Yeah.
because, of course, I uh, um, resigned my medical license, and they want you to say surrendered to make it sound as bad as possible. But I resigned my medical license and told them not to contact me ever again, and I pretty much ghosted them, and so that worked. I didn't pay my renewal fees. I owed them $5,000 for part of my probation, and I ignored that, and they never pursued that. And once you give up the whole thing, they have no more power over you. So, and it permitted me. I'm a little bit older. That permitted me to go ahead and write full time. And you're going to have a wonderful career, I'm sure. I mean, you're so creative, and you've got a lot of resources. So I'm sure you're going to have a lot of fun. But before we go into this, just tell a little bit about your how you got those people off of the pain drugs. Now, I'm aware that pill mills were the first pain clinics, and then they evolved into places like you, where the good ones gradually tapered their patients off the opioids. And you probably are aware that the number one cause of death now under 50 is opioid overdose in America. It used to be accidents. And that probably includes murder and homicide and car accidents and everything. But now it's opioid overdose, and it hasn't gotten better as we've gotten aware of these companies and so on. So sorry about interjecting myself in your podcast, but go ahead,
But
blast
that's
off
okay.
from
No,
that.
that's a
Yeah.
very, very valid subject. It's a huge, entirely, riveting subject for many patients who suffer chronic pain, especially those who are in palliative care and with conditions that will never get better. And they're suicidal without something for pain, like CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome, or RSD, reflex sympathetic dystrophy. It's known as the suicide disease, where the legs turn into tree trunks, or an arm. It just turns red and hard as a tree trunk. It's obviously very painful. So somebody has to do something for some of these patients, and I had a collection of them from a previous clinic. So what did I do to help them get off? I experimented on them with their permission. For example, I didn't know half the medications that they were on, because the former physician was Dr. Forrest Tennant. He's got a master's in public health. He was there for Elvis Presley's autopsy, and very highly regarded and respected. He had them on a lot of medication. So for a month to 3 months, I didn't change anything on anybody. I just kept them on what they were on, because I was so newly back to medicine. I didn't want to kill them. So I knew if I just did that, I would be safe and everybody would be safe. And I told them to start saving, etc. And then I started using my own experience at Stanford Pain Clinic, especially, and with the veterans who also had suffered a lot of pain. And I started experimenting by adding particular drugs. I widened the reach of labs that he had used, which included a lot of endocrinology. So I tested for viruses and lupus and all kinds of different things, Lyme disease.
Lyme
And
disease.
he did that too. Yeah, Lyme disease was a big one. And so the first medication that I tried, everybody went on it at the same time, which was pretty nice, was clonidine. And so I learned later, because I started at the lowest dose, but that was too high for some people. And one gentleman fell and broke his nose and sent me a picture of his broken nose, bleeding and everything. I felt really bad, but they were so sweet, and he was so kind, and the whole clinic was really tuned in to my wanting to help them with a polypharmacy approach that could cut inflammations. That is a alpha 2 antagonist, so it stops the pain signal from going from the spinal cord to the brain. Patients with chronic pain have different PET scans of their brain. It changes the brain, it depresses it, and activates areas that shouldn't be activated. So something like clonidine can actually, and now we have low-level light therapy patches that do the same thing, that stop the pain signal from going from the legs to the spinal cord, so that the second neuron from the spinal cord to the brain never even gets activated. So the brain just stops feeling the pain. So that's what I did, is I tried one thing after another: steroids, hormone replacement, with continuing with that Dr. Tennant had done. And so I came up with a protocol, and that's why I wrote the guidebook to low back pain, which I think actually helped the medical board target me some more, because here I'm not board certified in pain management, even though my ex-husband was the president of a very prestigious organization or two as an anesthesiologist as well. And we traveled all over the world, and I wrote papers with him. So I didn't have that board certification, but I certainly knew a lot and saw a lot.
You were too
So
late to take those boards, weren't you? Anesthesiologists are allowed to take those boards without any additional training, aren't they?
no, you
They
need an
were at
extra
one time.
year. You need an extra
I,
year.
I think up
Yeah.
until a certain point, they were allowed to just take the boards.
Yeah,
But I
no.
think you came out of the fog in 2018. That was after the grandfather thing.
There was
So,
a
yeah,
there was a pain fellowship program when I was a fellow at Stanford in critical care, so it was older than that.
yeah.
Yeah, like 1997 or so. Or I believe there was already a pain fellowship. So that was how I did that. And I just want to comment on what you were saying earlier about writing books. Like, none of us seem to write books to make a lot of money. I think there's a few people that make a lot of money writing books. Writing a book is an extremely prolonged process, right? With edits, re-edits, this, that, the other thing. It could take a year to write a book. But
I took 3 years for Butcher.
there you go. See, I was being conservative.
Did you get professional editors?
No, I was always really
Yeah,
good at
I thought your
writing.
prose was excellent. I had a look at it, and I'm a total Poindexter about that.
Thank you. Like I write my own Substacks. I have the rebelpatient.substack.com. People think I have a team. No, it's just me. There's nobody else. Yeah, no, I edit my own, I write my own writings and I edit them myself as well. I pick my own pictures, I make my own memes. I do everything myself. But let's talk about what happened with the medical board. But I'll say one last thing about the pain patients. So this is really super important. The opioid crisis that's been in our country is not an opioid crisis of doctors and patients in an exam room writing opioid prescriptions. It is an illicit fentanyl crisis from China and Mexico, where they're lacing it with illicit drugs for even teenagers, or dollar bills. Like, don't even pick up a dollar bill at the gas station. There was a report of somebody who got laced fentanyl on a dollar bill floating around at a gas station. She picked it up and went into respiratory failure. And people around her had to call 911. Somebody knew how to do CPR. So you have to be careful, about that. But I just want to clarify that, because I actually think that ties in with COVID. They started to eliminate the use of opioids in our veterans first, way back in the 2015s and earlier. And they were actually showing up at the VAs when they were closed, going to the emergency room and shooting themselves in the head to protest how much pain they were in, because their VA pharmacies refused to fill and their physicians refused to prescribe. Then they took that template and they applied it to the general population, where they stopped having pharmacies, the mainstream pharmacies, fill prescriptions for opioids if you could even get a doctor to write for it in the first place. Most doctors don't want a DEA license. They let it expire. They just say, oh, sorry, I don't have a DEA license. Can't do that. Send you to a pain clinic. And so the pain patients, I think, were practice for the COVID patients, because here the government had main pharmacies. Didn't matter how much you yelled at them, they refused to fill. Didn't matter what you wrote, they refused to fill. And that was a stone wall to America. When COVID came around, they would not fill ivermectin. They would not fill hydroxychloroquine. Fortunately, most of them didn't know that doxycycline, the antibiotic, acts like hydroxychloroquine. That's what they gave in India and Uttar Pradesh for 5 days, 100 milligrams twice a day. Simple, cheap antibiotic, together with 3 doses of ivermectin and zinc. And that cured millions of people living in close quarters. So I would prescribe to the regular pharmacy doxycycline and make sure they took zinc also, and a couple of all the supplements. But in desperation cases, when I screamed at a lot of pharmacists, accusing them of killing my patients, and they, for the first time in our country, doctors and pharmacists were quoting the CDC on anything, on not prescribing and not using ivermectin. And okay, so here's my question. When has any pre-med student, medical student, resident, intern, fellow, nursing student, pharmacy student ever been asked one question in training or on a medical board exam about what the CDC ever said about anything ever? Not once. 0 times. We don't care what the CDC says. It's owned by Big Pharma. It's funded by Big Pharma. RFK Jr. just came out with that big conclusion. So they're not a scientific body. They're not objective. They have their own reasons for saying what they want to say. So with that said, with COVID and post-vaccine injury, I like to start with the usual, the ivermectin, the hydroxychloroquine, maybe some doxycycline, just to decrease any viral particles, and zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, quercetin, and melatonin. In my guidebook to low back pain, I have an entire chapter devoted to melatonin, which you take at dusk, not at bedtime. And you take a high quality supplement so that you don't get a hangover effect the next day. And it's not too high of a dose so you don't get hallucinations or bad dreams. But your brain normally secretes melatonin at sunset because that's part of your circadian rhythm, your day and night cycle. So of course, something has to change when the sun goes down, and that's your melatonin. So you always want to take it at dusk, number one. And number two, I have pictures of some studies showing that if you grow a corn in a melatonin base, some little spike of melatonin in it, it acts like a growth hormone. So melatonin is actually in plants. It strengthens them so that they can withstand storms. And you can't even get melatonin as a supplement in other countries. So I like that has been on a lot of protocols, and I emphasize it and re-emphasize it. That's one of the other medications I started on all my pain patients as well, because none of them were sleeping, and sleep is number one. Diet is very high up there as well.
Did you use long-acting melatonin, and what was the dose?
3 milligram dose. I like the Metagenics company. We have to be real careful about supplements in our country, because just because it says there's melatonin on the bottle doesn't mean it's actually inside the supplement that's in a pill. Some of them have nothing in it, but a lot of fillers, they lie on the label. So I like the Metagenics brand. Their blend is called Benisum, and I'll give you a link for that. My website there is margaretaranda.metagenics.com. And they put a little magnesium in there, a little calcium as well, so that it helps your muscles relax, and it's good for heart and muscle health. So it kind of maintains all that. And they have found that blend, even with a low dose of 3 milligrams, is a really good blend. And my patients love it so much. And so do other patients, apparently, because every so often it's out of stock. So I recommend for people to just, if you order one bottle, you'll probably forget to go back and order it again. But if you just start off by doing the monthly shipments, you get something like 5% off. And then you feel more obligated to actually keep taking it. But that, I think, is one of the easiest things for most people to do. And but it's super important to have a high quality supplement, so that number one, you're getting the real thing, and number two, you're not getting a lot of additives that are not helpful. So I like that idea as well.
So go into your, how the whole thing developed with all your patients and how the medical board got after you.
So I'll be just a little bit careful, because I'm waiting for an official acceptance of my surrender. I'm not sure how long it took them to get back to you when you
You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to even talk to them. Just ghost them. That works. But I did. They eventually sent me something which my lawyer told me to sign. I was just going to ignore that and see what happened. But I don't know what they can say if you write them a certified letter that says that you resign your medical license. And I want you to go into the reasons why you decided to do that instead of fighting it. I was 65. So I thought, if I have any brains about me, and my wife had been urging me to quit for 2 years. She was a lot smarter than I am about it. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
It's funny how that is, right?
Yeah.
The people that know us and love us, they see what we go through too. So I think that I had started to receive complaints just prior to COVID, maybe like 1 or 2 pain patients. As you know, they all have a pain agreement. So if I find ketamine in their urine or methamphetamine, I'm allowed to say, sorry, you fired yourself, you're out of my clinic. Well, a lot of them obviously weren't very happy about that. Right. And I get it, but that's not my fault. You did that to yourself. I'm just the messenger, really. So I had a group of disgruntled patients. I had a disgruntled former employee who I think had access to them, especially on Facebook messaging. And she struck up a group of people to go after me with the intent to put me in prison, reportedly. So I got, then when COVID hit, of course, people couldn't go to a lab for anything. They couldn't see their cardiologist. They couldn't go for this, that, and the other things. So I would be very careful to document. I'm just doing this because nobody else will. Patients instructed to make an appointment with our cardiologist. Month after month went by. She still didn't do it. So I said 30 days and I'm done. And it was like I was damned if I did and damned if I didn't. If I prescribed not enough pain medication, too much pain medication, no cardiology medications out of compassion versus prescribing out of compassion without labs if necessary, just based on what they've been on for years. Everything I did was wrong as far as a group of people were concerned. So I started getting more and more complacent.
There are exact parallels with cosmetic surgery patients.
Right.
Most of them are
Like,
great, but a
sorry.
few
Yeah,
of them drive you crazy. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating. Like, I didn't go into medicine to
Be a
not follow the
babysitter.
rules.
Yeah.
Right. And I need to know I'm doing the right thing. And so that was important to me. So the complaints were, and then I started prescribing ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. I wrote a letter of exemption for vaccines. I got complaints about that. So those went to the medical board as well. Curiously, they held an interview with me and they just mentioned those without asking me any questions about them, but focused on, I had 2 binders, this thick of paper charts on one patient who complained, left my practice, came back, had been with me for a long time to generate the second big chart after maybe 2 hours just on that one patient and 5 hours plus on all the complaints that they brought towards me. They find out patient's not even mad. She became my patient again. I forgave her for her outbursts and I treated her. And boom, they still want to take me to task for that. Like, I knew when I inherited the clinic, they could take my license away any day because I was overprescribing compared to everybody else because nobody was prescribing. It's all relative. So the thing that I think really triggered the focus was September 30th, 2022, when Bill AB 2098 was before Governor Newsom to either sign, veto, or kick back. And so I organized a group of 15 to 20 doctors, lawyers, activists, including then a child activist, Max Bonilla, to go and do a press conference on the steps of the Capitol building in Sacramento. It was a wonderful day, I have to say. It was very spiritual. I prayed before and after. A lot of people talked about answering to God and not to man. The government doesn't belong in the room with the patient and the doctor. This is part of the Hippocratic Oath. This is the basis of our medical freedom. And there were 20 people in the audience. PPRM, the Patients and Physicians for Medical Freedom, was a group that came to that as well. Carolina Bonita came as well and helped market it and organize it with people that were filming it and recording it, et cetera, and spreading the news. And it was something that nobody else would have done anything had it not been for us being there on that day. There was nothing else said from any group anywhere in California but us, going till almost 5 o'clock, the last day, the last time. And then, of course, at the end of the day, Newsom wrote a letter and he signed it into law. And I just want to pause for a moment. We have a clip of a video where Governor Newsom is standing behind his podium talking about Florida, taking medical freedom away from patients in Florida, censoring what doctors can say to their patients, calling it a Salem witch hunt for doctors. And at the end of this video, Governor Newsom points his finger with the American flag in the background at his big podium with his mic there, saying, if they can come after your doctor, they can come after you. He knew exactly what he was doing. And this is why he's being primed to be president too, I believe, because he's just trying to get away with as much as he can counting on the apathy of the American public, or they're being scared to say anything, so that he can bulldoze government overreach into everyday life. So September 30th, 2022, 10 days later, I received my first request to surrender my license, and it was perpetual from then on, one thing or another, more complaints, more surrender. Then this is what happened that made me tip over to go ahead and actually surrender my license. I was away out of state. Two investigators went to my former office, supposedly to deliver papers. Then they went to my home. I had already sold my home, so they didn't know that. They asked the realtor to provide my change of address information, and she said no, she wasn't free to do that. It wasn't part of her job. They could wait till the papers were filed. It would be public record. Then they came to my house, which was on the change of address, and they left an envelope with just my name and address on it, not even a return. It was just handwritten. It was very unprofessional, under my front mat, that contained a demand for me to release the charts of 3 patients. And inside there was 3 different pieces of paper, one with each name of each patient on it, saying that, giving them a chance to object to me providing their medical records by notarizing this document, and they were all blank. Nothing was notarized. So
Yeah, without
nobody,
that signature, you don't have to do anything. And
well,
I've been advised of that several times. They have to get the patients to sign for the chart
but it's
release.
a double negative. It's not what you think. It's not permission to sign. It's permission. It's not permission to provide the information. They were trying to make the patients notarize a document.
I know. Did you have a lawyer
not to
representing
do
you?
it.
Did you have a lawyer representing you?
No, I don't have a lawyer representing me,
Well, you
because
have to always have a lawyer with the medical board, because they don't pay any attention to, they're absolutely arbitrary. And there is a process, and you could have continued to fight, but there is certainly an argument for quitting after all that.
well, I had a lawyer for the first, up
Sure.
until a certain point. I spent $40,000, and I didn't want to spend any more. I could see that's money that just goes and goes and goes, and it doesn't come back.
The
And
real parasites.
as much as I have a give, send, go, honestly, Dr. Kirkmore, who gave saline injections instead of COVID vaccines and helped thousands of patients not suffer and die and get myocarditis as teenagers, he says the same thing. Like, maybe 3 of his former patients have donated to his give, send, go. Our patients, I don't know why, but they really, it takes outsiders to contribute to help the cause. But yeah, I wasn't willing to spend tens of thousands of additional dollars. I'm 62, like I said, and I've had enough. But the minute they wanted for me to produce patient charts or surrender my license, it was an easy decision, because I'd rather surrender my license than provide patient charts with no complaint, no harm, and no permission. And that should make everybody's feathers get ruffled.
Yeah, ideally you find a lawyer that does what you want, and you could have gotten someone to write it. Anyway, it's all water under the bridge now. It's great to retire and do something new. Tell us more about your current career and the prospects you have and what you're up to.
I'm on with 2 different programs. One is the Crow Tribe, a Native Indigenous Indian nation, as a certified tribal practitioner that allows me to be a healer in all 50 states. I maintain that and a research practice as a research investigating physician, where I write my own protocols and essentially do all the COVID, post-vaccine. I do a little pain management. I do a little weight loss as well, where I can go ahead and continue as a healer, both in all 50 states. And I'll let the audience know, I'm sure you already know this, all of us physicians who were required or ended up surrendering our licenses have now restructured a healing practice through a PMA, or a private membership association. It's an agreement between, say, me and you, that is outside of government reach. It's completely private. There's no medical records that are electronic. There are no electronic prescriptions. Everything is protected by treaties that HHS has with the indigenous Native Indians. So it's protected, it's different that way, but we also have it opens the door to other remedies that, like we said, were ancient remedies that the Indians, the Chinese, and other people use. There are provisions to acquire remedies through these organizations. And so I think it offers a wide array of options for people to receive regular prescription medications plus natural remedies as well.
And you can operate virtually.
That's right. I'm 100% virtual. I do make house calls if needed, especially for people that are more invalid and can't get out. But yes, and it's all 50 states, and any doctor, nurse practitioner, physician assistant can operate in this fashion. And some people say that you don't even have to be an MD. You don't even have to. Obviously, the American Indian healers, the medicine men and the medicine women, they're not MDs. They never went to medical school. So there's a lot more flexibility. And obviously, those of us that have chosen this path are many of us are very spiritual. I have my practice with Aranda MD Enterprises, PMA, set up as a faith-based organization. I pray with my patients. I believe in the healing power of God and the healing touch of God. And so just like the Native American Indians are very spiritual, also with a lot of their rituals that they have. So I'm learning more and more and happy to be a healer, because
they've set up a pharmacy on the reservation that you can access and prescribe from regular drugs like ivermectin. Is that correct? Or you would just refer to as foreign sources?
Yeah, no, that's not correct. And a lot of people think that. So I don't have to be American Indian. No patient has to be American Indian, and it is not on a reservation. So
but the pharmacy, you've got access to a pharmacy where you can prescribe. Well, God bless you, Miranda. That's just
I have a pharmacist, and I have a pharmacist in New York that will ship to all 50 states. Plus, I'm allowed to get ivermectin from India or anywhere else in the country, in the world that I want. I'm allowed to get anything from anywhere that I want.
Well, I'd say sign me up, but I'm so burnt out on regular medical interactions, and I'm working 40 to 50 hours a week on the Substack thing. I hope I'm helping some people. I've got 9,400 subscribers by now, but I think you're doing more good. And your ability to treat Lyme disease is probably pretty good too. So I think that you have a lot of takers. Lyme disease is ubiquitous.
And ivermectin has helped Lyme disease quite a bit. I have some patients that have remained on it twice a day for Lyme disease.
Well, we'll definitely put all this stuff in the show notes, and I think you'll get some customers or patients from it. And I'm impressed by your bravery and your service, and your story is unmatched. It's just phenomenal. So I'm grateful for your interview. Tell me anything else you want to tell my listeners.
Well, I just want to encourage people to realize that your health is, I'd say, 75% in your hands. A lot of people don't realize the importance of diet, of sleep, and just, the basics like getting outside and having a little sunshine, talking to people that love you. They say that if you even watch somebody perform a kind act, that releases serotonin and acts like an antidepressant. So I want to encourage people to think that not every problem that you have can be solved by a pill. God put us here to be around one another, to touch one another, to hug one another, to do kind deeds for one another. And we need to try to be an example of that by not reacting with our natural instincts, or having great offense or being easily offended, but by processing things that we would normally do, hesitating for a moment and instead responding in a loving way. I love that Dr. Rashid Buttar, who said he was poisoned by the CDC, I'm sorry, by CNN during his interview and died. I have a Substack on his last interview, his last long video, and his last short video. He took a compound. It wasn't a magic mushroom. It wasn't marijuana. It was something else. It was a special formulation that 12 scientists around the world had gotten together to concoct. I don't know what that formula is, and he didn't say what it was. But he had a supernatural experience and felt apparently that God was inside of him. A 2-hour video I have linked on my Substack at The Rebel Patient. He said that God wanted to tell him 2 things. One, the biggest message was, don't lose your free will. Don't feel like you get forced into doing anything. And the other one was, there was love and fear. So every reaction that you have should be tempered with love and not fear. And that makes sense because God is love. He is light. He is truth. And if we could temper our reactions and our responses so that we respond not by giving back people what they give us or raising it up a notch, which I did all that in jail ward because that's my opinion, what it took to understand. But
I worked in jail ward for a couple months also during my
did you?
residency.
It's quite the
Yeah, the
place.
same ward. Yeah. I was
13
wondering
floor.
why you mentioned that out of all your postgraduate training experiences. It must have impressed you.
It was impressive. It was. We were told on day 1, sitting around a big table, if anybody gets a pen and holds it to our throat, we're in a lockdown. And we had to go through a 12-inch metal door with a sheriff station based right there to get in and out of there. And we felt every bit like we were in jail as much as everybody else was. We had people trying to kick and bite and spit on us to give us HIV. We had drunks, the tank. Big room full of 20 guys chained with hard chains, ankles and wrists to the bed, vomiting on themselves all night. It was crazy. Yeah.
I just tried to hide. I don't remember it very well. That was a long time ago.
I got the short stick twice, so I had to go there twice. But I learned a lot. And I know people. I get along with everybody. If I don't get along with someone, it's because they have a problem with everybody else. But yeah, God gave us some survival instincts that I think got accentuated over there. But yeah, love and exercise your own free will. Don't think your healing is going to necessarily come from one pill. And look up, look at God, ask God, look down, get on your knees, cry, fast, pray. Fasting helps COVID and long COVID too. Whenever you raise your spirituality, you decrease your body and allow it to be minimized so that your healing and your miracles can happen.
So my parting shot here is we have someone who is a member of the specialty who uses the most medications. They use the medications every single day, every minute that they're working. And she's advocating less medications and natural medications instead of all those heavy drugs. So I'm tremendously grateful for your time in the interview, and we'll see if we can help your presence a little bit. Thanks again.
Thank you. My pleasure. God bless you.